Hello, Sebastian here from Twin Peaks. I'll now show you the volume profile section in the SidiFootprint Indicator. This is the profile here on the right-hand side, which we can display. Here, we have this whole area volume profile in the general markers and statistics area. We start in the general section and have the option to switch between volume profile, USEN, delta profile, or to display both. Let's start in the volume profile area. Here we first have the option of selecting a custom session. This means that we can filter here, for example, that we only want to see the things from the US market opening to, for example, 22 o'clock here, because that is the more interesting for us. In order for this to be calculated, we have to go to reload Ninja script here. Then it takes a little while. The whole thing is recalculated once. And we then really only look at the volumes and the trades, which are received from 15 o'clock 30, and then also have the clearer display here. For the actual US session, without overnight, we could also add 2 sessions accordingly, for example. For the EU session and for the US session separately, let's stick with the setting here for the American session only. How would we like the whole thing to be displayed? Either as a filled bar, as we see it here now, or as an outline, that would be this variant, or as an outline, that also exists. Personally, I would prefer bar field here. The width is always specified here in percent, or in pixels, i.e. the width on the screen. 10% is usually a good value. You can also make this bigger if you want, or smaller, depending on what you need for your trade. The display of color mode, saturation, or solid is also relatively self-explanatory. Solid is always the same color, and with saturation, the higher the value, the darker the color. Profile color dependency mode simply means that we want to display the value area or in percent here. We have already defined the value area accordingly here, 2001. I set the whole thing here to percent. Then we can already see here, the display changes here accordingly. We change this again to value area. And now we have the normal setting for outside VA and VA. Means that everything inside the value area is displayed in this orange tone, orange-red, and everything outside is displayed in this gray. It is also relatively clear where something is. We can also display delta line here if we want to. I'll now set the width here to 10 pixels. Then we can already see here on the right-hand side. We currently have a negative delta here, and this would then change accordingly if we had a positive delta in the entire profile. I'll go back to 0 now. Then the delta line is also gone. We can now display the profile in color and graphically. The second area are markers. I have now put them here on all, and these are just these markers. Once from the V-POC and from the value area high, value area low. These are simply the 3 markers that we have here, and also the progress markers within the day. So we see the daily V-POC was initially here, then it went up here, and then down here, and so on. And this is always easy to see here directly in the footprint. Where were these levels for us? The same always applies here for the value area, where the whole thing has jumped to in these areas. We can also display this very conveniently here, depending on the color and stroke type we want. Here again, show total volume delta. We have simply displayed at the top and of the total volume and the total delta at the bottom in this volume profile. So also a very pleasant function. Next is the statistics area, which if I zoom in a little, allows us to display values on the right-hand side. Here we have up to 4 values that we can set. In the first one, I have the volume, so it always refers to this value. Here we have volume. Then I still have the delta in the second one. I could now actually set the pure at and the pure cell volume with, if I would like to separate the two to see 2001, where there was perhaps greater buying or selling activity in price areas that stand out in particular. This function is particularly interesting in the area of swing trading. And the whole thing can then be displayed here in such a way that we say, okay, we might even want to have the delta in the value-based color. Then we can also see where the positive and negative values are correspondingly red and green. We have the same thing with the volume, where we say, okay, we might also want the to be value-based, but then it is actually always blue because USAND, it can only be positive. However, becomes a little darker in the shading here, depending on how you want it. Personally, I prefer to have the whole thing in black. So we have all the options here to customize it. Again, there are general settings here for these statistics, for the colors that we want to have, and also the opacity that we want to have displayed here. So we can see that we have a lot of options here. Even with this profile, if we now change the whole thing here above to delta profile, then we can already see that this changes in that the text values all remain the same because this comes from the marker area. But here, this area of the delta becomes more interesting for us. So it makes perfect sense to display a somewhat broader profile here, simply to see where there may have been extreme values. I'm going to go a bit stronger here. Then we can see here, there was a very strong buy at the top. Make it a bit smaller or is also a bit clearer. Down here, there was a very strong sell, and here a strong buy. And the nice thing now is that these values change dynamically. If I move the chart over to, you can see that it is only ever calculated up to that point, where it originated, so to speak. So here, where we are now starting in the bar, is a 5-minute chart. Then we can already see how the distribution has changed accordingly. And so we can also very easily check where 2001, where what has arisen and what the course was here. This can be very interesting, especially in the area of order flow trading to work with. So feel free to give it a try. The same applies here, of course, if we change the whole thing here to the volume profile. You can see here, this is now also correspondingly dynamic that it is edited. I'll now go back to 10. Something more meaningful. And here we have another nice visualization of how the volume profile has changed over the day. So it is really live visualized. And that is a very helpful function, as we find. This is the whole area for here, the volume profile. In the next video, we look at the statistics, also a very helpful tool in footprint and order flow trading.